In the last video, we looked at unreachable states and we looked at the technicalities because of it. Like you can add any number of unreachable states to an existing DFA. The DFA won't change. It is still the DFA of the same language, right? And if you remember in the constructing DFAs, in the very first video of constructing DFAs, we saw that for a given language, there is only one minimal DFA possible, but it can have multiple DFAs. So if for a given language, if you limit the number of states to the minimum number of states, that is called minimal DFA, and that is going to be only one. But if you don't have any restriction on the number of states, then you can have multiple DFAs possible for a given language. And how is that? One of the ways for multiple DFAs is unreachable states, and we have seen in the last video that we can add as many unreachable states, and within those unreachable states you can define any moves. It does not matter. It's still a different DFA for the same language. Similarly, if you look at the first video, let me go through that. For example, if you look at this DFA, okay, let's look at this DFA. Okay, look at this. So this is a DFA for the language L equals to A comma B, right? So when L is equal to A, it will be accepted. When L is equal to when string is A, it will be accepted. When string is A, B, it will be accepted, right? Good. Now if the string starts with B, there is no way whatever the remaining string is, it will be a part of the language, and so we give it to a dead state. So Q4 is a dead state and Q3 is a dead state. In this, Q3 is a dead state and Q4 is a dead state, right? Q3 and Q4 are dead state. Where Q1 will go on seeing A? There is no way AA and whatever comes afterwards will be a part of the language, and so when you are at Q1, if you see A, you give it to another state Q5, and this is also a dead state, right? Q5 is also a dead state. So this is, let's say, M1. Machine 1 is the M1 represents L1, M1 represents L1. Okay, and there are multiple DFAs possible for this, and let me make two more DFAs and I will show you what I am doing. So this is M2. Okay, M2 is also the DFA for L1. M2 is also DFA for L1. And what are the differences between M1 and M2? The differences between M1 and M2 is that in M1 there were 5 states. Here we have only 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, in M1 there were 6 states. In M2 we have 4 states. So Q4 and Q5 is not in M2. Actually in M1, Q3, Q4, Q5 all were dead state. So what we did in M2 is, instead of having 3 dead states, we have only 1 dead state. Okay. So none of this Q4 and Q5, none of these are Q4 or Q5 or Q3, none of these are unreachable states. So they will come in the path. For a string, it is not the case that it will not come. It is not an unreachable state. It will come in the path of the string. It will come in the state sequence Q4 and Q5 and Q3. It will come in the state sequence of a string on this machine M1. For the string that is not part of the language, it will come. All of them will come. But M2 is supposedly the minimal DFA for this language. It has only 1 dead state. Okay, so what we say is this, that Q4, Q5 and Q3 are equivalent states. Q4, Q5 and Q3 are equivalent states. And in minimal DFA, we have only 1 state. For equivalent state, means in minimal DFA, we don't have redundant states, so to say. Okay. we'll take one more example. Another, we can write, okay, we can write this dead state. This is dead state, right? We can have this thing also going on. 1 minute. Consider another machine for this language L1. L1 was A comma AB, right? A comma AB, A comma ABS. So on A goes on B, goes here, and then you see anything where we go to a dead state, but we will not make it a dead state. Okay, what I'm going to do, see, if it starts with B, goes here, and if it starts with A, goes here, and what I'm going to do now, so this is Q0, Q1, Q2, Q3. I'm not making it a dead state. Instead, what I'm doing from Q3 on seeing A, I'm going to Q4, and at Q4 when you see B, you go back to Q3. So what will happen is that once you enter into Q3, now whatever the remaining part of the string is, you will oscillate between Q3 and Q4, and Q3 and Q4 are non-final state. So whatever the string is, that is not going to be accepted by the DFA. So technically it's not a dead state, but it is oscillating between the two. I am not trying to complex things up, listen. In the upcoming video, we will deal with this concept of equivalent state in depth. But the aim to achieve of this video is simply that you are aware of the technicalities that is possible because of unreachable state and because of equivalent states. So when we say that there are multiple DFAs possible, it is because of equivalent states. When we say that there will be only one minimal DFA, but any number of DFAs possible, what we mean is that the equivalent states can be reduced to one. We can have a DFA in which there will be only one equivalent state. With respect to any state, there is not going to be another state which is equivalent to this. If such a case is met, then we get the minimal DFA, right? And so if I have to, so in this case, Q3 and Q4 are equivalent. Q3 and Q4 are equivalent. Okay, okay, I will make things simple now. So two states, I will make things simple. Okay, I will make things simple when two states are said to be equivalent. Two states. Okay, listen, if you have watched this video and if you are confused, then but you have got the sense of it so far, then from now on to the remaining part of the video, just pay attention. Once the video is over, things will get to you, and if it does not get to you, watch the video again, it will get to you. Okay, very good. So two states are equivalent. Two states are said to be equivalent when do we say that two states are equivalent? And I am again saying this, I am not going into the depth of it. We will see this in DFA minimization. Why I have introduced this, you will come to know in a short while. Two states are said to be equivalent. Let's say if this is one state and this is another state. Okay, this is state Q1, this is state Q2. Okay, when you are at Q1, means by traversing you come at Q1, and by traversing you reach at Q2. Once you are at these two states, now this state, whatever strings come, let's say W1 comes on Q1, W1 comes on Q2. If any string that comes on Q1 on seeing any string, if Q1 goes to a non-final state and Q2 on seeing W1 also goes to non-final state. If Q1 on seeing, say, W2 goes to final state, then Q2 on seeing W2 also goes to final state. Then we say that Q1 and Q2 are equivalent. Q1 and Q2 are equivalent. And what we do is to not have these two states, but instead have only one state. We will replace Q1 and Q2 with only one state. And we will see this in DFA minimization. But right now, get the idea of what is equivalent state. So equivalent state is if for, and this is true for every string. If this is true, if this thing, 1 minute, if this is true for every string, if this holds for every string, if this holds for every string, then Q1 and Q2 are equivalent. If this holds for every string, then Q1 and Q2 are equivalent. Okay? Good. So just look at this. Look at this. State Q3 and Q4. Q3 on seeing any string, if it says A, it will go to Q4. What about when it says B? So A comma B, make it A comma B. 1 minute. So you have, in DFAs, you have to define moves for every symbol, right? So 1 minute. So Q3 on seeing any symbol goes to Q4, and similarly Q4 on seeing anything goes to Q3. So Q4 on seeing whatever string you will see, Q3 on seeing any string will go to Q4, and Q4 on seeing any string will go to Q3. Q4 is a non-final state. Q3 is a non-final state. So Q4 and Q3 are equivalent. You get? Okay. So in this also, if you look at Q3, if you look at Q4, if you look at Q5, all these are dead states. But this can all be replaced by single state, because this thing holds true for Q3, Q4, Q5 also. Any string that comes, once you are at Q3 or Q4 or Q5, whatever string comes, now it will stay at itself and it is a non-final state. So Q3, Q4, Q5 are equivalent state. Yeah. So this is the observation that I made for DFA for finite languages. And what was the observation? That if you have dead self loop on any move, it must be at dead state. And for other final or non-final, there is no self loop or cycle. Okay. And I have dealt with the technicalities or inconsistency of this thing, inconsistency of these 2 points when it comes to enrichable state in the last video. Now I will take the case of equivalent states or equivalent dead states, so to say. More means it to be very specific. And if you replace this Q3 and Q4 and by one state, the state that you will replace it with will be a dead state, right? So this thing, if you have a self loop on any move, it is at dead state. It is at dead state. If this question can come in the examination, and if you are not careful whether they are asking about minimal DFA or any DFA, then you might do a silly mistake, right? Then you might do a silly mistake, because say Q3 is not a dead state, because you are not stuck in Q3. Q4 is not a dead state, and it is still the DFA for finite language. This is a DFA for finite language. DFA for finite language, and you are having a loop. So it means that this thing does not hold. That if you have a self loop on any move, it must be a dead state. It means that this thing does not hold. No, it holds. It holds for minimal DFA. It holds for minimal DFA. Similarly, for other final or non-final states, sorry, similarly for other final or non-final states, there is no self loop or cycling. This thing holds for minimal DFA, right? In the minimal DFA, this scenario will not be there. There will be only one state, and it will be a dead state, right? Okay. So what is to be sure of? Means if I have to say that what is the observation for any DFA? What is the observation for any DFA? Okay, listen. If you have self loop on any move, it must be dead state in case of minimal DFA. But if we talk about any DFA, then also, let's say this is any DFA. This was any DFA. Then also, from initial state to final state, between initial state and final state, you won't find any loops. Because if you find a loop from the initial to the final state, in the path from initial to final state, if you are at any state, if there is a path from that state to the final state, you have to write it down. If you are at any state, and there is a path from that state to the final state, to any of the final state, to any final state, then there will be no loop or self loop within that path, right? So now I am talking about any DFA, considering any DFA. Now that we have talked about unreachable and equivalent states, now we are making the observations for any DFA. So if you are at any state, there is a path from that state to number 1 point. If you are at any state and there is a path from that state to any final state, then there will be no self loop within that path. Okay, and these observations are for what? For DFAs for finite languages. We are yet to see DFAs for infinite languages, right? So I have delayed it for one more video to include this video before that. So DFAs for finite languages. So if you are at any state and there is a path from that state to any final state, then there will be no loop or self loop within that path. Okay. So no loop, self loop within that path. It means what? It means that the state sequence of a string will have no repetition, okay, 1 minute. If this is the state sequence of a string on DFA M is let's say S1, S2, sorry, Q1, Q2. That will be more appropriate. Q1, Q2, Q3, so on, so on. QF, QD1, QD2, so on, so on. So if this is the state sequence of a string, so you have QF is final state. So if final state comes in the state sequence, if final state comes in the state sequence, if final state comes in the state sequence, then from Qi, which is Q initial state, to QF, which is a final state. So from this part, within this part, so within this part, if final state comes in the state sequence, then within this part, that is Qi to QF, there will be no repetition of states. There will be no repetition of states. And in this area, you can have repetition, maybe Q2, QD2, QD3. You know, you can have, if it was minimal. We have seen that. We have seen this. Listen, see, when it was a dead state, it was repeated. It was repeating dead state, right? When it was a dead state, it was repeating dead state. Similarly, now that you don't have dead state, maybe you have, instead of like this type of scenario going on, but repetition is possible after that. And it does not matter, even if repetition is possible, it will be within these states. Within these states, it will revolve. Okay, right. Once it enter any such once it enter a state which is equivalent to a dead state, it will revolve within itself. It cannot be obviously it cannot be that from QD1 or QD2, which is equivalent to a dead state, you can go to any of this Q1, Q2, Q3. Because if you go to Q1, Q2, Q3, it means that from Q1, Q2, Q3 there is a path available to still get to the final state. Then how do you get to the dead state equivalent if it was not a part of the string? If it was a part, sorry, if the possibility of it to be accepted is still there, right? So that's it. That's it for no. Listen, let me summarize it. The summary is very clear. When you are given a question, about DFA, be very careful about what is being asked. If the question is about any DFA or if the question is about minimal DFA. In case of minimal DFA, you can form your opinion, you can form your answers. In case of minimal DFA, thinking that there will be no two or more equivalent states, and there will be number of the states will be minimum. And in case of any DFA, possibilities of take the possibilities because of mostly because of equivalent states, or maybe think about the unreachable states. But as I told you that unreachable states basically useless. They are not put much into thought while framing questions. So I hope that this is the last video before we move on to the DFAs for infinite language, or except anything comes into my mind again. If you are regarding this equivalent state, I think that if there was any confusion, then it would have been clear with this explanation. Any confusion on equivalent states must be clear, and if not, then you can mention it in the comment section. So, as of now, when I am making this video, I have 29 subscribers and I don't think anybody watches. That's why I'm laughing. But I will make videos, continue making videos. Thank you very much.